Hi, this is Sweet Life and I'm Natasha, back at it with a review and discussion of No Country for Old Men. We have this character, Llewellyn, who is out in the desert and happens to come across this scene, the aftermath of a drug deal gone bad. When he first arrives, it's during the day, he finds a man who's still alive, but barely. He's clinging to life, begging for water. But Llewellyn doesn't have any water on him at the time, really doesn't make any effort at that point to render any real kind of assistance. Instead, he just goes about his day. We see him go home. He's married. He has a wife, living a pretty normal life. It just gives you some perspective. He's living a very normal life. Nothing ostentatious, nothing out the way or anything like that. We don't really know much about his background, family history, or anything along those lines. But for all intents and purposes, he seems to just be a regular guy. Now, where things really get started is that after sitting around at home for some time, it's now nighttime, he thinks back and remembers the guy that he left out in the desert and decides to take a bottle of water to this guy out there. The question I would ask is, when he came across the scene, it was in the afternoon. When he's now returning, it's later in the evening, it's nighttime, it's dark now. Personally, it doesn't really seem like the kind of place I would want to hang out during the day, and certainly not at night. But it is interesting that you get the sense several hours have gone by between when he first came across this scene and when he now ventures back out with the water. Arriving on the scene, there are a few different vehicles. He pokes about a bit, realizes, I believe, one of the vehicles, under a tarp, there's quite a quantity of drugs. So at this point, it becomes obvious to him that this was a drug deal that went wrong. He came about the scene after everything went down. Easy to put two and two together, figure out what took place here. And so it clicks into his mind, right? Later on in the evening when he goes back out, he ends up finding that a satchel with a large quantity of money. Remember, this is now the dead of night. You're out in the desert, so there aren't really any houses or anything like that nearby. He's out there, it's just pitch black. And you get an ominous vibe because the place is secluded, it's isolated. It's like that during the day, but during the night is even more intense. It's you think of it if you're home alone and you hear a noise in another part of the house. It's dark, and your first inclination is to get some light, right? Either to turn on a light switch or turn on a flashlight, something like that, right? To get some kind of light. But in this case here, the scene is completely dark because he's outside. Turning on the light, there is sunrise, right? There's no light switch for you to flip. But suddenly there's this bright source of light in the form of a really souped up SUV with these huge bright lights. And it's in the midst of all of this darkness, you just have this blinding light coming off of these big headlamps. And instead of instilling confidence or comfort, immediately you recognize that Llewellyn is in danger. He recognizes it too and takes off running, right? Trying to escape from this SUV that's now chasing him. And so it's in this split second, it goes from being deadly quiet to a literal life or death situation. Can imagine you happen to come across this scene, right? These other individuals were likely connected to whatever it was that they had going on, right? You come across this scene by chance. These people came here looking for it, and they immediately begin chasing down Llewellyn. It's an indication that they're probably not interested in making friendly conversation, right? There's an immediate sense of danger. Up to this point, the story hasn't been not really slow moving, but it seemed calm, right? Nothing really going on here. It's just really ho-hum, normal day going about your life. But here, where he revisits this place out in the desert, there's a present danger. The people in the vehicle basically corner him. At that point, they get out, they release a dog that chases him down. And it's imagine this. You're out in the desert, which I would think is terrifying on its own. But here it is that you have someone chasing you through the desert, and they unleash what seems to be a pit bull on you. So he takes off running and is just flying like the wind because he's running for his life at this point. He manages to escape, but does get injured along the way because it's you're out here, you're running. He wasn't equipped for this. He doesn't have on running shoes. He's wearing boots or something. And it's like he doesn't necessarily have the resources to be out in the desert carrying on and whatnot. But fortunately he escapes, makes it to like the next day. And my thought process would be to just leave this stuff well alone. You know, the first time when he came across this stuff, it's like, you know, it was just by chance, right? When he found the money. And it's like, now he has this money, and with everything that he's seen, there should be some indication that there's something wrong here. Because these people that came out looking for this scene, you know that they don't have any good intentions, right? For your own safety, you should get as far away from this scene as possible. Because this money that he has, you know, it's like he had the opportunity to escape to some degree, but it's like, I look at this money as like a huge problem, yet he's determined to hold on to it. When he returns home, like he's left his vehicle at the scene. And, you know, given that he didn't go out there like prepared to get wrapped up in this situation, you know, anyone that's able to, they can run his plates, find out his identity. So it's only a matter of time before these people come looking for him. And so he puts his wife on a bus out of town for her safety. But it's telling that he doesn't immediately make any plans to get out of town, right? He doesn't go with her. He sends her to safety and kind of steels himself for the drama that he has to know is coming. So from there, like the story just takes off, right? Because sure, you have the guys in the SUV. But he doesn't like know what problems he's in for, because it's like, whereas there was a large quantity of drugs, the cash that he took, it's not like pocket change. It's $2 million in cash. These guys in the SUV, there's more coming after that, right? Whoever's money this is, they're coming to collect. Now, unfortunately for him, the guy that they send is cold-blooded killer, an absolute sociopath, Anton Chirguh. Anton is like a dog with a bone, in the same vein that Llewellyn made up his mind that he's going to do what he has to hold on to this money. Anton has been hired by the person who this money belongs to get it back. And he's just as determined. And so with that, it becomes like this cat and mouse chase where Anton just like keeps coming and coming. Now, granted, initially, Llewellyn has like a little bit of a head start because given that he randomly appeared on the scene, Anton doesn't really know who to go looking for. And so he has to spend some time figuring that out. At the same time that all of this has taken place, the local sheriff, played by Tommy Lee Jones, Sheriff Bell, he becomes aware of what took place out in the desert, right? Or at least a basic understanding. They come across a scene. So now there's an investigation where, at this point in the movie, you have this investigation taking place from two sides, where on the one side you have the sheriff. He's looking at the situation from a law perspective, as far as how do you solve these murders and how do you bring someone to justice? On the flip side of that, you have Anton, who's really operating from like the criminal side. He's not concerned with justice. He's concerned with getting this money back. And then you have Llewellyn, who, as like this person on the run, is kind of running from both of them now, right? Like, you have these people hunting him down for information. In the case of the sheriff, he wants to know what happened, you know, and then in the case of Anton, he wants the money back. And so there's a sense of danger because anyhow Anton catches Llewellyn, that's going to be problems. What actually kind of builds the suspense and lets you know like this guy is not for play is that the movie doesn't start off with him coming in guns blazing or anything like that. Rather, Anton appears on the screen as a very calm individual, yet you immediately get a sense of danger from him. Because in him trying to find the person that took the money, like to figure out what turns out to be Llewellyn's identity, you see him have interactions with other people in town. He's not like a loud, rambunctious kind of person, but you get this sense of like a cold, simmering threat, where at one point he goes into a gas station, very calm on the surface, has a conversation with the gas station attendant, but the interaction is terrifying because basically he initiates a coin toss with the man for his life. Like, just imagine how insane that is, that you would use a coin to determine whether or not someone lives. And it's something that we see him do at different points throughout the movie, where he's basically deciding between killing someone or letting them go based on a coin toss. Like, He makes it appear like he's leaving it up to fate, but in reality, he's setting this thing in motion. And it's like some commentary on how little he values life. Sure, in some instances he just kills outright, but then there's this thing of, on occasion, toying with his potential victims, where in conversation, these people come to realize that, like, this guy's a potential menace. The conversations reach a point where you realize this man is teetering on the edge of figuring out whether or not he should kill you. And so just imagine the terror of something like that this person, very calmly, with no provocation or anything like that, you're just going about your day, and you come across this guy who initiates a coin toss to figure out whether or not he should kill you. It makes for some very terrifying scenes. And it's like one of the things that I find in movies. As someone that's a fan of movies, I've heard commentary and interviews and whatnot with actors and stuff, where you have some bad guys, they come on the scene, they're loud, they're obviously violent, over the top. And sure, that can be scary. Someone who's just completely out of control. But I've also found that, like, these kinds of characters, these very cool on the surface but absolutely raging underneath type characters, can be especially terrifying. Because it's like, looking at Anton, the way he carries himself, there's like an eerie calm. It's sort of like if you think of the movie The Sixth Sense, right? Where one of the ways that these spirits would be indicated is that the temperature in the room would drop. You get a sense that there's some other presence there. There's like this ominous, creepy feeling. And you get that here as well with Anton, where people are just going about their regular lives, and he shows up. He's not loud. He doesn't yell. He's not like obviously aggressive, but he enters the room and you just feel like all of the air has been sucked out of it. Suddenly there's like this tension in the room. It's like he comes in and his presence just completely changes the mood of the room. So cool and calm about these life or death situations that it puts you on the edge of your seat. And then when he figures out, that Llewellyn is the person that has the money and begins pursuing him, the tension just ratchets up to a whole other level. You then have Sheriff Bell on the other hand, where he's also like a cool and calm person. He's been sheriff for years. The movie starts off with this narration from him talking about being a lawman and how for years, right, in the past, lawmen were able to do their jobs and whatnot without the need of a gun. He speaks about where some other sheriffs operated for years, decades even, without having ever fired their gun. But that over time, things have changed. The old way of doing things no longer work. And it's like with him himself, I believe he states that he became a sheriff in his 20s. Looking at him, you would assume he's like at least in his 70s or something like that. And he talks about like now as an older man, he's seen a lot. He's been through a lot. It's offered him the opportunity to see just how much things have changed and are changing. And this kind of plays into the title of No Country for Old Men, where things were so much different when he was a young man. A code of conduct, lines that shouldn't be crossed. Sheriff Bell is pretty much nearing the end of his career, and he's looking back over his career. He's looking back over his life, the things that he's seen, the level of violence, just the disregard for life that he's now seeing makes him uncomfortable. It's sort of like the sun is setting on him in his time. Arguably, this world, this society that's breeding this kind of violence is just not for him. This new society just doesn't jive with him. He doesn't understand this level of violence. Like, sure, there was crime before, but this level of violence, just the blatant disregard for life, makes him uncomfortable. He's trying to protect this man. He's really trying to find Llewellyn to protect him, while Anton is trying to find Llewellyn to get the money back. And you get the sense that their paths will cross. Anton has figured out that Llewellyn has the money. He goes to his house, speaks to people in the community, trying to get an idea of where he might have gone, where his wife might have gone, so that he can track Llewellyn down. The bag with the money had a tracking device in it. And this now brings Anton and Llewellyn directly into contact with each other, which just ratchets up the tension even more. Because it's no longer this thing of Anton rolling around trying to find him. He's zeroed in on him. He now knows who he's looking for. right? Which now means that Llewellyn is in incredible danger. Llewellyn, to some degree, is kind of disregarding his own life, right? Because he's more concerned with trying to hold on to this money. And so he decides to engage in battle with this guy. On the other hand, you have Anton, who really has no regard for Llewellyn's life. As we've seen up to this point, he's focused on the money as well, right? Getting it, retaining it. And so there's like this ominous presence here. Within maybe like the first 10 minutes of the movie, Anton is stopped by, I think it's like a sheriff's deputy or something like that. Someone from within the sheriff's office. I don't understand really how titles and stuff work. He allows himself to be arrested. He's taken to the sheriff's office where he's put to sit on a bench in handcuffs. Probably been arrested before. His hands are behind him. But as this sheriff guy is on the phone, he ever so calmly brings his hands to the front of him by just stepping through his arms. Sheriff's deputy is on the phone, presumably talking to the sheriff, letting him know that he found this guy with this ear gun thing, brought him in for questioning. He's been arrested. He's there in custody. And it's like, while he's on the phone having this conversation, we see Anton in the background, not really knowing at this point who he is, but he's in the background and ever so calmly, moves his hands to the front of his body and then walks over and ever so calmly strangles this man, like violently strangles him. And it just gives you an idea of the kind of man that he is, that you're dealing with someone that's just a little bit different. And this is just within like the first few minutes of the movie beginning. So it's like, as the sheriff is talking about how things are changing, how the nature of crime is changing, how violent society is becoming, it continues on throughout the movie, right? Where there's commentary from both sides, where just this depravity, this disregard for human life. But then at the same time, you see Llewellyn, who he hasn't worked for this money. It's not like he's been hustling away, plugging away at some job for decades, and this is like his nest egg. This is money that he came across, and in efforts to hold on to it, he's risked his wife's life. He's risked his own life. He's taking a chance. He's risking everything to hold on to this money that really doesn't belong to him. And it offers commentary on society, right? It's like you end up with these three different perspectives, which is actually like rather creative, right? It's like once the tension just ratchets up and we get to the point where Llewellyn and Anton meet, for some degree of time, Llewellyn's able to like kind of fend off Anton. But like they're going to clash and it's going to be a him or you kind of situation. And so it's like, you have some moments that stuck out to me, and it's not even like the open violence in the moment, right? It's like the lead up, where there's one scene where Llewellyn goes to a motel, which is where Anton originally tracks him down to. He leaves that motel, goes to another motel. He takes a room in that motel. There's a desk clerk downstairs, and I believe it's like a cat or something like that. And so he's now upstairs in the room. Early in the day, we see that, while he was at the first hotel, that he bought a shotgun. It looked like tent poles and whatnot. And he's converted the gun from like a long barrel shotgun to a sawn-off shotgun. And so when he moves into this hotel, we see him sit down in the bed and wait for Anton, because he knows at this point this guy is coming for him. But what's incredible is that he's sitting there expecting Anton, kind of trying to prepare for him, sitting on the bed in the hotel room. Right? Like, eyes focused on the door. It's like a bed and breakfast kind of situation, a small establishment. And he's there with the shotgun on the bed. And there's like a light coming from underneath the door. Just like a little space at the bottom of the door where you see this light shining into the room. Because he's turned off all the lights in the room and he's just sitting there and wait. These are like the little touches that I tend to admire in movies, right? He calls down to the desk. There's no answer. And he knows that not that long before he passed the desk clerk downstairs, but the phone is just ringing. There's no answer. He's sitting in the dark in this room, watching this light coming through the door jam. And suddenly there's this shadow. My heart stopped for a moment. It's apparent that someone's standing on the other side of the door. Like you see where their 2 legs or their 2 feet, the shadow of their 2 feet are on the other side of the door. And your pulse starts racing because you just know it's Anton. You hear footsteps and you see the feet stop right outside the door. In this light that was just like a solid beam of light before, you see this shadow. And then it continues down the hallway, the footsteps. You breathe a sigh of relief until the lights go out. You see the light that was coming underneath the door go out because he's unscrewed the light bulb. It's like just these little interesting touches, these little details. Anton carries an air gun, right? The sheriff speaks about like how they kill cows with them with air guns instead of like hitting them with a hammer or something like that. And you typically see people moving around with guns in movies. It's commonplace, right? We see police officers, military people, and whatnot with firearms. Here's this guy just wreaking havoc, carrying this weird-looking thing that people look at and they have no real idea of what it is. It looks like an oxygen tank with a hose attached, like some souped-up kind of thing that you would use to pump tires, right? And so people look at it and like they're puzzled by it, but he uses that in place of a gun. And so here it is that you see Llewellyn sitting on the bed. He knows at this point that Anton is on the outside of the door, but he's sitting there waiting for him. But instead of Anton like kicking in the door or, shooting into the door with a gun, the crazy thing, like his calling card is the use of this air gun thing, and he uses to shoot out the lock. The whole setup of this scene is just absolutely insane. It's so outside the norm of what you would expect. Why? Because he's not carrying a gun. He doesn't come in like just kicking the door in. Like, I think that's probably like one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene in the movie. These little touches that they add makes the movie stand out. Anton is probably like one of the most different criminals or like villains that I've seen in a movie. And it's in large part because of like these little touches in the movie. It's like, sure, you've seen similar things in other movies. The hero of the movie, let's say, stumbles across something or they find some kind of money or whatever. Like, you've seen that in movies. But I like these types of films where they add a little twist. They do something new that makes it seem incredibly fresh and different. And it makes for like really entertaining movies. I can't even begin to express to you how much I like and recommend No Country for Old Men. It's an incredible movie. It's a movie that I've seen numerous times, and yet still, every time I watch it, it's just as enjoyable as the first time. I can't recommend it enough. It's a really, really good movie. It is the definition. It fits perfectly the phrase of edge of your seat thriller. It's not like one of these movies with an unexpected plot twist or anything like that. It's just that the way the story unfolds is so interesting. It feels fresh and different. It's an incredible movie. I would say at this point, and this is as someone who's like watched a lot of movies and enjoys movies, I especially like thrillers. This is now certainly in my top 10, right? Certainly in my thrillers, but probably ranks up there now amongst my overall favorite movies across any and all genres. And it's one of these movies that like, I guess a lot of people didn't see when it first came out. And it's like for everyone that I recommend it to, they always say like it's intense, but they also like it as well. There's no major plot twist or anything like that. It's a movie that you can watch time and time again. And each time you watch it, there are like little details and touches that you pick up on that make the movie all the more enjoyable. The creative way in which it comments on senseless violence and lawlessness is just really amazing. Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my movie review playlist. Go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.